Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I want to discuss something which has to relate to, well, everyone in the Dragon Ball community thus far, which is the reaction and the fallout to Dragon Ball Daima, the teaser trailer, and the overall announcement and concept. Because with regard to this, it definitely has been polarizing to say the least. There are definitely people who are very positive about it, and there are people who are quite negative about it. And thus, as a result, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be examining the pros and cons of what we're currently being presented with while showing, certain imagery along the way. And then in turn, I will also kind of say where I really fall on overall. So let's get into that right now. But before I begin, if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing and enabling all notifications. That way you can stay up to date with all my future videos. Make sure to leave a like, share your own thoughts down below, and watch the entire video. That way you'll be able to help us to get even more promoted and go even further beyond. I don't want to keep saying the same thing in every video. But with that being said, guys, let's get into the video. All right, so the first thing that everyone is reacting to, regardless of positive or negative, has to come down to Goku and everyone else in the main cast that we've seen thus far being turned into kids. Now, we don't know for a fact exactly how they are transformed into kids. The trailer implies that's through a wish on the Dragon Balls, although considering the fact that we've learned in the past that the Dragon Balls cannot affect an unwilling character unless they are weaker than that of the Guardian or the god who created the Dragon Balls, the Namekian, in this case Dende, then in turn, how would every single character at the same time, especially characters like Goku, Vegeta, and Supreme Kai, who are way more powerful than Dende, capable of being affected and turned into children, which is one of the things that leads me to suspect that maybe that's almost like a red herring with what we see with the Dragon Balls, that they're used for something else, like maybe bringing back Babidi, as we see in the trailers him being shown a lot, and the same thing with Majin Buu, and also even Deborah, who gets briefly mentioned and has a direct connection to the demon realm, where it seems like the villains have been coming from. But with regard to everything we've seen thus far, people have seemingly, for the most part, been overwhelmingly negative about Goku and Vegeta being turned into kids. And one of the biggest reasons for that is because of Dragon Ball GT. After all, the very first episode of GT saw Goku, the main character, being turned into a kid, the Black Star Dragon Balls being shot off across the galaxy, and thus in turn, Goku, Pan, and Trunks, and then eventually Giru, would go around the galaxy to different planets on a grand tour in order to get the Dragon Balls to come back and then somehow eventually reverse Goku's aging. Now, in terms of this story, it does seem very close to that in a lot of ways, where Goku, Supreme Kai, and Kibito are going to be going off on another journey to try and track down the evil sorcerer, the evil being, maybe a demon, for example, or a Makaio Shin, a demon type of evil Supreme Kai, I guess Zamasu wasn't for whatever reason, and in turn being able to, in fact, undo what has been done to them. And the thing is, considering the fact that they are going after these demons as children, that would also lead me once again to make the idea or the possibility that perhaps they were actually transformed into children by some other type of magic, which is probably the reason why they're trying to track down the villains as children in order to defeat them. But with that being said, again, a lot of people don't like this conceptually. They think it's, oh no, GT again, oh no, this is going to be terrible. But with regard to that, it's definitely something I can understand why people would react negatively to. People didn't really like the direction that GT took things. They didn't like how Goku had been taken from someone who is basically a master now at the position of power that he was at and regressed him into a child. It symbolized in many ways how the franchise was being regressed, because unlike with Dragon Ball Z, for example, where things went in the direction of science fiction and taking everything in a further progressive path with regard to Dragon Ball GT, instead of moving on to brand new things with brand new concepts, maybe brand new characters taking over the forefront, which Oob was kind of set up to do, Gohan before him, and Goten Trunks, Instead, it basically just regressed everything back to the start of Dragon Ball, except in space, with Goku being a kid one more time, and then in turn pairing him with characters who just weren't handled that well and ultimately didn't really matter, considering the fact that other than powering Goku up or contributing for moral support, everything came back down to Goku winning again and again and again until they just eventually ended the franchise with, again, it not really feeling like true progression in the sense that it should have. So a lot of people definitely seem justified in their appraisal of the characters being turned to kids, Goku going off with Shin Kibito in order to try and go on this magical tour, this Daima tour of, I guess, the Demon Realm. But at the same time, this is just a teaser trailer. We don't really know how everything's going to be executed, and maybe just based on appearances, people are being turned off by the child aspect of it. It might still end up being executed in a way better way than GT ever was, and taking concepts that on paper definitely wouldn't appeal to the fan base, but in turn end up actually being handled in a great way to where, like, you know, it was kind of weird that Goku and friends were turned to kids. It kind of was strange in a sense that, you know, Toriyama decided to once again repeat something they did in GT. Not only with Goku, but then expanding it to all of the main cast. But simultaneously, if that's just one little thing that kind of leads to the entire franchise or the entire series playing out, where it ends up being great and has great action and animation, then that doesn't really end up being a problem now, does it? I mean, after all, the original Dragon Ball had some of, if not the best fight scenes in the franchise, and most of that Goku was a kid during that time. Additionally, the animation that we've seen thus far from Dragon Ball Daima in the trailers looks great. I mean, we see just the little fight scene between Goku and Vegeta when Goku's in his base form and Vegeta is in his, and then we see them firing the Gallic Gun and the Kamehameha at each other, which is kind of a throwback to what we saw with their original fight in the Saiyan saga, which, of course, at this point in the franchise, they are always going out of their way to showcase and keep reminding us that happened, even though there are really more iconic fights in the series, but they always show us this one as if it's the most. And most people seem to be appreciating the animation. Even the people who do not like the concept of Goku, Vegeta, and everyone else being turned to kids are still saying that the animation looks great. And that's because the fact that they clearly are really going hard on this. In fact, it's probably also contributed by the fact that Toriyama is working so heavily on this particular series. And Toriyama himself complained to Toei staff because of the fact that he didn't think the animation was good at first for Dragon Ball Super. And so many other people didn't think so either. I mean, we remember episode 5, for example. So the overall reaction to the animation here has definitely been a positive one. Now, a lot of that comes down to the fact that it is being led by Nakatsuru, who is in charge of the animation and design in Dragon Ball GT. And so, as we know, GT oftentimes looked really good. So seeing him return has already shown to be a net positive when it comes to the animation. Now, I do suspect that most of what we see in the trailer actually comes from the first episode. There's so much stuff that sets up the overall premise of the story with the showcasing of these beings who are watching imagery and perhaps past clips, you know, maybe through GodTube, for example, of Babidi, Majin Buu, and the Buu saga overall, as well as the different exploits of Goku and the main cast. And coupled with the fact that we see Goku and Vegeta and everyone else being turned into kids in this trailer, it seems like most of it is from the introduction. And thus, as a result, I suspect that within at least the first 1 or 2 episodes, we will see pretty much everything that happened in the teaser trailer playing out, because it is, in a sense, a way to introduce people to the series. And so as a result, it makes me even less inclined to want to react in a very strong way, because the fact that I feel like many people who are right now are just missing out on the fact that it probably is just really early stuff that happens in the series and only gets way better from here. And again, the child aspect might not even last the entire series for all we know. It might last for one arc, and then they might have several seasons, several arcs of this show that all go in different directions. I mean, what if after this arc, what if Goku and the cast are turned back from being children and they say, "Can you please make us older again, Shenron?" And he's like, okay. And then he turns all of them into old men. And so we get an arc where Goku and friends are now old. And then we have maybe they're so old that they're also once again weakened. And thus in turn, the most powerful fighters are Gohan, Goten, Trunks, and the characters that would be naturally long-lived, like, for example, Piccolo, and characters like even Master Roshi, because he was already old to begin with. So how much older are you going to make a hundreds of years old immortal man? And we see just how broken his power is in the Tournament of Power, especially in the manga version when he's fighting Jiren. So we don't really know, and that's why I feel like with regard to the reactions on both sides, I do feel like we've seen a lot of extremes. Sure, it's definitely a good idea to try and have, a little bit of skepticism about everything that comes out. After all, this is a trailer that is supposed to get you excited for the product that you are then going to either purchase or consume in the future. And thus, as a result, as informed consumers, we have a duty to ensure that anything we go into, we at least are able to look at the ins and the outs of it, the pros and the cons, and then decide based upon that whether we're going to like it. And definitely when it comes time to watching the show, I feel like one of the things this fandom really needs to avoid doing with this series is being blind fans who in turn will start to attack anyone who does in fact have valid criticisms. And the very same thing could also be the case, I guess, for people who attack anyone who likes it. I think at the end of the day, people need to stop with the kind of generalization, the ganging up, and saying things like, we only wanted Dragon Ball Super to continue, or we only wanted this or that. Because when you say we only wanted, you're speaking for everyone, but the truth of the matter is there's plenty of people who never wanted Dragon Ball Super to come back again, plenty of other people who wanted something totally different, plenty of people who love GT in this fandom, and they wanted to see more of that direction style. So again, I definitely think it's a good idea to go into this with open eyes, with also a hint of skepticism, and if it ends up being bad, then definitely that's something that we need to admit to, because there have been plenty of bad things that have been in this franchise up until now, especially in the modern iteration of it, the Dragon Ball Renaissance, if you will. And the very same thing is the case for if it ends up being great. I have been ready for something really good to come out of this franchise for a long time. I tried really hard with the Moro arc, and when it comes to the movies, I love Dragon Ball Super Broly. I'm not afraid to admit that. And I also really liked Dragon Ball Super Superhero and definitely love certain aspects of it. And who knows, maybe I'll end up liking it even more than the Broly movie in the future. But who knows whether or not this is going to turn out that way. That's why I'm going to do the same thing that I was doing leading up to this, which is I'll see it when I believe it. I'll wait and see. And hopefully it's good. But if it's not, well, you're going to hear it either way from me. But with that being said, guys, let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. If you're new here, subscribe and enable all notifications. That way you can stay up to date with all my future videos. Thanks for watching this far. You guys are awesome. And make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe.